guys. My name is Megan Conahan. I'm an EVP here at Direct Agents, and I am joined by this lovely friend and human digital marketer next to me, Arielle Heyman. Arielle is the head of digital and marketing at Bugaboo North America.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. What I wanted to do with this session is kind of bring it back to reality, right? We talked about the metaverse, and we talked about the future of no more cookies and how stressful that all is. But I want to bring it back to what are you doing now here as a brand, and really talk about the things that are affecting you here in 2022, and obviously what you're thinking about for next year. So let's start with privacy. Obviously, we talked about, everybody knows what happened with iOS 14. We know what's happening with the future of no more cookies. So can you just talk to me about what is Bugaboo doing right now? How are you approaching targeting? Are you doing everything that Martha said, and you're testing into cookieless solutions and you're so advanced? Can you just talk to me about where you are right now and where you are going as a brand?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Megan. I think for me, and this is something we talked about, like the impending death of the cookie keeps me up at night as a marketer. I think all of us in this room, we've become, as the team has said, so reliant on how that plays a part in our marketing. I think for me at Bugaboo, my approach is certainly different than other brands. So for those who don't know, Bugaboo Strollers, we are a premium stroller company. So my consumer, I have like a 2-month tops decision journey to be a part of at a very specific moment in someone's life. So I can't just focus on building my own first-party data. I really need to think about, how can I still reach my consumer without all of the interest and behavioral targeting that's starting to disappear? So I've approached it a couple ways this year. I think we're really at the start of that test and learn phase. I think it's going to become more and more critical. But for me, I've been looking into more platforms where they have access to clean data rooms, so that I can leverage some of that real-time first-party data that I don't inherently have access to through a platform, and contextual targeting. Really starting to layer that in a much bigger way into my media mix.
Do you find that your reliance on some of the social channels has changed as you get a little bit more into contextual targeting, or are you as reliant on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, everything as you used to be updates?
It's a bit of a catch-22. The short answer is no. I think everyone was hit with iOS 14. So even though we've known that there have been these upcoming changes for a while, this is not a secret. Mm-hmm. Everyone noticed that lack of attribution, that lack of efficiency, and really losing a lot of those identifiers. So all of that to say that I've really started leaning on some of these testing platforms that we're leaning on. Social media marketing is still very much a part of my mix. Organic is really critical. Paid is still a part of it. But I think as a marketer, diversification is key right now. Mm-hmm. No one wants all their eggs in one basket.
No, and what I thought when we were talking through this, and we were talking about contextual marketing, and Corey touched on Reddit and Pinterest and keyword based. Oh, you're reading an article about new moms or strollers, and obviously Bugaboo will be there. But you also think about contextual in a way in which people who are buying or shopping at Bye Bye Baby are a contextually targeted audience for you. So you're thinking about contextual from even a partnership standpoint.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So for me, contextual targeting isn't even just a blog. I think a lot of things can and will become more critical as contextual targeting. So for me, it's a blog. Yes, it's a pregnancy app, but it's also some of my key retailers that play a really key touch point in that consumer decision journey. I think more so, I'm looking at influencers as contextual targeting as well. There are influencers out there who have very specific and very deep niche audiences. And I think that's another way to, I mean, this definitely isn't the right word, but game the system.
You can say it. We're friends here. It's fine. Okay, so let's pivot to the attribution conversation. So obviously, we touched a little bit on it, and with the update, the iOS 14 update, that really affected attribution. And Bugaboo, like you said, you're a luxury stroller. This is not let me just click on this because it's like $10.99 and I'm going to buy it. It is already a considered purchase. So I'm sure you were already like attribution was a thorn in your side, but now it is more so. So how are you thinking about attribution right now, and how are you continuing to pivot that? Like, where are you Bugaboo attribution right now, even if it's just like super dirty and not great, and where do you want to be?
Yeah, I mean, look, I always wish that it was better and there was more. But from an attribution perspective, like dialing back to where we are, we have one of the most complicated consumer decision journeys that I've ever seen, being such a high value item. I mean, our consumer is online, offline, through retail, on our .com. It's like a million different touch points. So there's already an inherent challenge with a considered purchase, how you're gonna measure that. We've done our best to really measure end-to-end with iOS 14. I think you've lost some of those touch points and capabilities to even be able to measure, the data within your own ecosystem. I think we've gone so reliant on being able to feel confident about knowing 100% what's going on our own brand.coms, and that's no longer a given. So for me, it's shifted the way that I look at signals in my marketing. Short term, I mean, long term, I think we're looking into different solutions. But short term, while revenue and ROI, I'm a scrappy marketer, I like my dollars. It's always really critical. I'm looking for other indicators that show that my marketing has made an impact. So what's an example of that? For example, if I'm running media, yes, I'm looking at ROI, but I might also be looking at my brand search impressions, like different metric indicators that really prove my consumer is taking that step further down the funnel.
We talked about this, that like it kind of is like a dagger to your heart as a performance marketer to not be like, this one line item generated like $100,000 in revenue, but
it hurts.
It does hurt. But like we have been talking about it, and I was talking to Jackson about this the other day. I don't know where it went behind me. And we were saying performance marketers have to be like, we're going to have to kind of like get rid of these bad habits that we have inherited because we're making the cookie, to Martha's point, do all these things it was never supposed to do. And we're going to have to be a little bit maybe more patient with all of these things. And I hear about brands thinking about like a 7-day rolling CAC and all of that based on your media mix. And there's so many different things, but I think you're right, because I read these articles about brands doing these really sophisticated things. And I'm like, I know they're not all doing this. Like, this is just aspirational. And I think a lot of people are in your boat where you're saying, let's be a little bit more lenient. Let's look at other KPIs, because we can't just look at what we used to look at in 2019, because that's just not realistic.
Yeah. And I think, look, we still have performance indicators in what we're getting. So even though it might require a little bit more effort and require a little bit more analysis, we can still understand when things are impactful to the consumer, to the viewer. So that's where I'm leaning in short term.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you said it's hard to measure how things are, or how people are buying on your .com, and that's not even a given anymore. So that's going to lead me to the Amazon conversation, right? And so what I want to know from you is you sell on marketplaces and Amazon. How has that relationship changed for you? How has your relationship with retail media, with marketplaces, with Amazon? How has that changed? Are they a friend? Are they a foe? Are they a frenemy? Like, how are you viewing them and how are you thinking about them, in the future?
Yeah, I think Amazon is one that I'm viewing them in different ways. Amazon, the way it has evolved over the last, I would say, 3 years in particular, I really see it as a secondary .com. They've made all of these strides to really increase the sort of brand levers that you have at your fingertips. So you now have the ability to email consumers, to create, really brand heavy experiences on that ecosystem. I think the other part of it is I truly do not think that Amazon and my .com compete. I think a consumer that is purchasing on Amazon, they are part of that. I'm sure the statistic is outdated, but 52% of consumers who start their product search online are Prime members. They complete it there. So I think you have to be present. You have to be treating it like a brand identifier. I also really value the level of first-party data that Amazon has at its fingertips. And so the more that the cookie retreats, I start looking to my retail media partners who have not just context, but these really wide databases as a way for me to still have some level of agility and flexibility within my marketing strategy.
How do you feel? Has everybody heard of the Buy with Prime update not update, that's a terrible word for it, but where Amazon has essentially announced that they will be able to, on your .com website, fulfill for you. So you can go, you don't have to do fulfillment on your own. They will fulfill for you. You get your product in 24 hours. They're not just a payment processor anymore. They are going to be your fulfillment solution. How do you feel about that? Knowing how much data you might have to give up to an Amazon. Do you love it? Do you not quite sure? How do we feel?
I have mixed emotions.
I know, me too.
So the great thing about this is I think it really frees up capabilities for a lot of brands who maybe don't have the funding and ability to logistically handle a DC, a distribution center, or who cannot make 1 to 2 day shipping happen. So I think that in and of itself is going to be a huge opportunity. But, there's always a catch-22 with Amazon. I think it's the potential catch-22 is the consumer gets used to faster and faster shipping. So if you don't play the Amazon game, you have to continue to think about what added value am I bringing to my consumer.
Yeah.
I'm torn.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are. And that's part of the thing. I was talking to somebody and it was like, it's almost like Uber or even Amazon back in the day where they get you in with these low prices and then they jack them up and you're kind of like, what's the catch? Okay, one of the last things I want to talk to you about is something that's on everyone's mind here: inflation, increase in costs, right? I don't remember who I was talking to at the before, but it was something, I read a stat and it said 70% of brands that sell on Amazon have already increased their costs in 2022. And that was just happened to be an Amazon stat, but I'm sure that it's just where we are. Everybody is increasing costs. So how are you dealing with this? How are you dealing with communicating to your customers that things are more expensive now? Are you doing, I was talking to someone at a beauty brand and they said some beauty companies are making these really cutesy little videos to send to their customers. Like, this is why things cost more now. But how are you approaching it?
Yeah, without giving away too many state secrets, my approach is really in deepening my brand integrity and the way that the consumer connects with the brand and the product. And this is coming from a luxury gear-driven space. I really want my consumer to feel confident in understanding what they're paying for. I think universally the consumer knows that costs are rising. That is a given. I think what's going to be interesting to see over the next 6 months, depending on your consumer demographic and who you're trying to reach is how are you proving the value of your product and your brand? And I think that's going to become a lot more critical and at the forefront of how we're marketing. So whether that's, giving that access to visibility in supply chain or, explaining what goes into building your product, I think at the end of the day, it's increasing that transparency into the why behind who you are.
Yeah. We were even saying that maybe you guys are in a sort of, I don't want to say fortunate. I don't think anybody would consider any retail or e-commerce brands fortunate in the last year, but a position where you have a luxury product that people will pay more for because it's for their child, right? And everyone wants the best stroller, the safest stroller, all of those things. You're not necessarily in a, we're not selling like Swedish fish or something.
Yeah, I think it's, yes.
Yes. I mean, that would be great too.
That would also be great. I love candy. But I agree with you. I think that, the way that I would approach what I'm doing now would be very different if, say, I was marketing Swedish fish, because I think then you have a far more price conscious consumer who would probably be more sensitive. For me, having my core demographic be millennials who really are looking for quality. They're also parents. You want the best. You want the safest. It's not an area where you would save money with the offset being a reduction in the product quality. I think that for industries where there is the potential for that decision with the consumer, that's where you're really going to need to find other avenues to prove value.
And then my very last question for you is that you have a history of working with brands that are going up against maybe the 500-pound gorilla in the room. And I won't name the 500-pound gorilla in the stroller market. It's like Voldemort. We don't say the name. Yes. If you're a parent, you know what it is. But how do you go about standing out? Like, how do you build this niche when you're faced with somebody who's spending 50, 100 times what you're spending?
Yeah, and it's, this goes back to why the death of the cookie keeps me up at night. It's really about creating authentic and targeted communities with your brand. And I think that's how you create that momentum to go up against the 500-pound gorilla. I also think, really doubling down in a nuanced way into like what your brand and product why is in those audiences.
Yeah, and you guys have a really great like cult following. So you've done a really great job with that. Okay. Perfect. Well, those were my questions for you. That is it for our fireside chat. I'll open it up to any questions that anybody has for Arielle or for anyone that we've heard from thus far. Yeah, Sammy.
Awesome. First of all, thank you guys for the intro. It's been really phenomenal. And congratulations on 19 years. Really amazing.
He's not a plant. He actually, yeah. He came out of his own accord. Okay, let's keep going.
So as a brand and with the deprecation of cookies, do you find yourself having a harder time identifying your audience, targeting them, or mapping attribution? And then as a second point, for contextual targeting, while you're using that as like a new way to find audiences, are you saying this is like the inventory or the content where my audiences exist, and that's the best way to reach them in the future?
Yeah, and I think those questions kind of tie together. So, as a marketer, I think it's really critical to have a deep understanding of your consumer and to continuously go back to that. So, with that as step one, that's how I identify who my consumer is, what sort of behavioral interests they may have. And I think from there, it's kind of approaching the way that we've typically used some types of media in an inverse effect, where then you take that information and can identify like, where is my consumer? So that's really guided the way that I approach contextual targeting. And then I think what was the measurement question? Could you repeat that?
Have you had trouble, because you said that's something that you want the dollars, you want the ROI, have any like the cookie deprecation or any of the changes in the landscape affected your ability to measure that?
Absolutely. I mean, statistically, the majority of people in this room probably have Apple iPhones. So if you are prompted actively to opt out of being tracked, most people say sure, and they don't understand the impact that that's going to have on their online experience. I think, to a point made earlier, we've gotten really used to having curated ads served to us and relevant ads served to us. So really interested in seeing how that turns out. But yeah, from a measurement perspective, you easily lose 20 to 25% of your audience. Now, again, I think that you're still able to map the consumer indicators and where they're going. So it's not a complete loss. It's just, for me, it's been a little bit of a perception shift in how I approach attribution.
You know what's interesting? I was reading, and I can't remember which CMO it was, but they were even saying on their social channels or mobile channels that they are now over-indexing, obviously, on Android. And you're probably similar, where that's just not their consumer. So they've had to go in and almost like hack the algorithms to be like, no, that's not what we want. And that's like a whole nother section that we could obviously talk a lot about.
Oh yeah, retargeting would be another fun conversation right now. We'll be here another 30 minutes and you won't get your wine.
Any other questions? You could also find everybody else at the bar. So I will then, if nobody has anything else, I will break. Thank you all so much for coming today. And like Martha said, it was, I think, our first in-person event, all of us presenting in a really long time. And we're going to be doing a lot more of these, hopefully monthly, part of our acceleration series. So please look out for additional invites and information on the other events that we host on a variety of different topics. But we really appreciate you being here, and enjoy the rest of your evening.